Thank you for joining us for Sermons on Demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. We provide these videos as a way to share the pulpit messages and teachings offered at Friendship Grace Brethren Church. If you find these videos a helpful resource, please drop us a note at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com. Now open your Bibles and get ready to dig into the Word of God.
Father, thank you for all that you do for us, for loving us, calling us to be your children, and providing for us your Word. And in your Word, revealing yourself to us so that we can relate to you better. Thank you for this group of people that gathers each week to study your Word and to know you better and to relate to you better. And as we continue to look into the resurrection, that you would be honored by that, and that we would understand the resurrection just a little bit better, and that we would understand how it applies to our salvation better. Thank you for all that you do for us. Give us a great time as we study and as we fellowship. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, I'm jumping over some sections because they would be incredibly technical and even fairly boring. And I don't want to do that. And some of the stuff is redundant, so I've chosen a couple of sections to jump over. But I just want to talk a little bit about one section if you have the PDF and are looking at it, session 16, the categorical problems with the naturalistic theories. We don't need to spend a lot of time on talking about the problems with the naturalistic theories because he has debunked the naturalistic and the supernatural theories as he went along. So this one is kind of redundant, and he spends a lot of time talking about historical figures and how they approach things, and so I just felt that this was one that we could easily jump over. But one thing that jumped out at me on if you're looking at your pages, page 99, categorical problem number 1, and I have a big star and I highlighted Hume was wrong. Speaking of David Hume, one of the philosophers of the 19th century and I guess of the 18th century. He's the one that set up a lot of what became the German liberalism, and I just love how he just categorically says Hume was wrong. I know that doesn't mean a lot to you at this point, but one of the frustrations with the naturalistic theories is that no single theory explains all that we know, as he would put it, explains all the data. So as you're looking at those naturalistic theories, you have to combine them in order to have any potential for getting it right. And that's a real problem. The hallucination theory, the swoon theory, all of those theories require extra steps in order to get there. The only thing that really fits the data that we have is the supernatural theory of the resurrection of Jesus, the physical bodily resurrection of Jesus. With all the data, remember when Dr. Habermas talks about data, he's talking about data accepted by the historical scholars, not just by Christians. So the only thing that fits what we know is the bodily resurrection of Jesus. None of the naturalistic theories fit, and the Jedi Jesus, which we looked at last week, doesn't fit. This morning we're going to look at a video that he's titled "Understanding the Mind of a Skeptic." This is a useful one to us because it's getting us to see into the mind of the people that don't believe in the resurrection and what they're thinking, why they think the way they think. And so I think this one is helpful to us. And like always, if you have a question during, just let me know and we can stop it. Uh-oh. Control it this way. Understanding the mind of the skeptic.
Well, I like to review a little bit, not actually review, but to show where this lecture fits. And we have just finished a series, a good portion of this course, on naturalistic approaches. We've looked at 120 to 30 years of German liberalism and how they responded to the resurrection. We've looked at several independent naturalistic theories, what I've called fraud 1 and 2, or fraud A and B, stolen body theories. Swoon, or apparent death, hallucination, legend. We've even looked at the supernatural thesis, but it still comes out of the liberal movement, what I call supernatural theories, like Theodore Kimes' telegram theory and modern day apparitions of the dead, so to speak. And then we ended last lecture with 5 critiques of naturalistic theories as a whole. What naturalistic theories have to overcome? We talked about Hume is wrong as a backdrop to the refutation of miracles. Let me just stop here for a second. I remember doing a research paper many years ago for a conference, and you'd be surprised how critics after Hume, after a 1751 essay on miracles, how many critics after Hume, David Strauss among them, would say, the miracles issue is totally dead based on Hume. Because of Hume, we never have looked at this anymore. Because of Hume, we're free of religious prejudice and religious, they didn't say Sunday schoolism, but that's what they're talking about. Hume played that role for people, like when Harvey Cox of Harvard, my last example, when Harvey Cox says, the Humean mark on my brow was too strong, so I can't entertain any evidence at all because Hume's just too much. We say Hume's mistaken, and Hume's mistaken at a bunch of levels. There's so many complicated and very useful studies have shown today, and I talked about George Mavrodis' of University of Michigan Philosophy Department. All right, secondly, no one theory does it. You've got to use more than one, and multiplying improbabilities makes a more improbable theory. Thirdly, the liberals went after each other. Fourthly, 20th century rejected pretty much wholesale the naturalistic theories. And then 5, the number one comeback is that each one fails to explain the data. And if you're doing a minimal facts argument, it's amazing if the naturalistic theories each fail simply according to the minimal facts, i.e. the facts that the critical scholars themselves accept. They accept enough to refute these theories. That's rough. Okay, now with that behind us, I want you to take a break here and talk about the skeptical mindset. What does the skeptic hear while you're going through these responses? Here's what the skeptic hears. A skeptical platitude that's very frequently noised abroad is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And there's no more extraordinary claim in the ancient world than that Jesus was raised from the dead. In fact, as we said before in here, Christianity may be looks like it's the only religion. Jesus, the only founder of a major world religion, who both claimed to be God and claimed, and about whom his followers claimed, that he was raised from the dead. The only one. So, let's go back to that. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. What is more extraordinary than a once in history claim? You go, well, wait a minute, I'm going to be too quick about that. there's Elisha, Elijah, there's Lazarus, there's Tabitha with Peter. Yeah, but that's not the kind of resurrection we're talking about. We're talking about a resurrection, never to die again, into the world of immortality, and Jesus is one of a kind. And the skeptic is just sitting there going, you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing some very tall claims. And when you make very tall claims, you need very, very, very tall evidence. That's our comeback. Now, there's a side of me that understands and agrees with what they're talking about for several viewpoints. Consider the fact that I told you before, I was a doubter for 10 years. I wanted someone to go beyond the normal stopping point when you say, okay, that's enough evidence. I wanted somebody to go way beyond that. When I was a skeptic, resurrection is a very strange event. Second perspective from which to look at this claim, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Like I said, it's a unique event, so you're really making some kind of claim here. But critics do more than this. What really bothers me about the extraordinary claim requires extraordinary evidence comment is that for a lot of skeptics, what they mean by extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, it sort of sounds like this. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's really what they're saying. And when you say, how do you break that second word extraordinary down? They won't say this, but here's kind of what they mean. Well, just believe me, you'll never reach it. Oh, really? Okay. So, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and since you're making a very extraordinary claim about resurrection, I'm just here to tell you, you're never going to reach those levels. Is that right? Now, we started this course in the second lecture talking about a priori philosophical objections to miracles, not a posteriori. We just finished a posteriori claims. That's naturalistic theories. But a priori claims, we talked about, we summarized 12.5 of them, where critics say you don't have enough evidence to pull this off. One of the objections should just be, and actually it is something like, you just don't have the data. There's not enough data in the world. You're just not going to get there. You're not going to ever get enough to satisfy me. Now, I want to respond in the next lecture how to have some comebacks to that. But for right now, I just want to lay the skeptical claim on the table. I want you to hear what they're saying. They're saying, you need a whole lot. Maybe you need more than you're ever going to get for this. And you'll never measure up to the point. Here's another thing skeptics like to say in this lecture on the skeptical mindset. Frequently, they'll say this. You'll give your data for the resurrection, and they'll say, yeah, well, I don't think I need to give a naturalistic theory. And I tell my students, push them for a naturalistic theory. Push them for a naturalistic theory. Because a lot of times in debates, Anthony Flew was a good example. Probably the best-known philosophical atheist, probably wrote more to defend atheism than any other person who ever lived. When he and I debated, we've debated 3 times in the resurrection. But when we debated for the first time in 1985, he didn't want to give a naturalistic theory. He didn't want to get pinned. Now, why doesn't he want to give one? Let me tell you why I think he doesn't want to give a naturalistic theory. I was dialoguing with the guy one time. I have to have my pen to do this illustration. I was dialoguing with a fellow one time, and in the college where I was, it said over the doors, no smoking. And every time I ever saw this guy, he would come in, put a pipe in his mouth, light up, and he'd lecture right looking at a sign that says no smoking, and he'd lecture. I mean, this is truly a 60s thing. And so one time he and I were dialoguing on the resurrection, and he was a thoroughgoing atheist, angry atheist. I saw him one time, a football player, made some pro-Christian comments. I had no reason to think the guy was a Christian. He just made a couple pretty innocuous comments. And the professor basically asked him if he wanted to step outside and have this out. Really? All right. So I'm dialoguing with this guy, and I said, pick a naturalistic theory. And he said, no, I'm not going to pick a naturalistic theory. And while he's talking, he goes, lights up. You know how people talk when they have a pipe in their mouth? Yeah, I don't think you're going to pull. I don't think you're going to. It's easier to do it without the little button at that. I don't think you're going to pull this off. And I said, please, take a naturalistic theory. And he said, no. And I said, why not? He said, because I'm going to pick a naturalistic theory, and then you're going to come against that theory, and I'm going to be in a corner, and I don't like that position. I don't want to be in the corner. I say, yeah, but look, think about this. You're a naturalist, right? Yep. I'm a supernaturalist. I'll tell you what I think happened. God raised Jesus from the dead. Now, why don't you tell me what you think happened since you're a naturalist? Nope. Not going to do that. I said, come on. Pick a naturalistic theory. All right? And remember I told you the other day about how critics who haven't thought through this, their theories are often sillier than Christians who may be Christian, but they've thought it through. He said, all right, disciple stole the body. I'm thinking to myself, yes. And I started giving him refutations to fraud A. And then he says this to me. Habermas, this discussion is over. I'm not talking anymore. Why not? I don't like getting pushed in a corner, okay? That's the same guy who challenges a student to step outside. It's over. We're done talking. I don't like being pushed. All right? So no evidence is ever enough. You need more than I could possibly give. I asked you to pick a naturalistic theory. You didn't even want to pick one for fear. He's one of the few people who would voice it. I'm not picking one because I don't want to get pushed in a corner, which is interesting. But here's a comeback that a lot of skeptics have to that kind of question. All right, we'll pick a naturalistic theory. And here's what they have started to say in the last 15 years. I don't need a naturalistic theory. Any naturalistic theory is more likely than resurrection. Now that's a real look at the skeptical mindset. They think, I've already given you two kinds of responses. One is the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and frankly, you will never reach that level. So you won't have enough. Second, I don't have to pick a naturalistic theory. Any naturalistic theory is better than your stupid approach, your Sunday school approach, or your naive approach, as surveys and now studies have shown us, one of the most interesting problems with contemporary atheism is that in a recent, I think, secular psychological survey, atheists are one of the largest people groups manifesting anger toward God. 19% in the survey. 19%.
Yeah, think about that. Expressing anger toward God, but atheists believe that God does not exist. Well, I understand how they could be angry, but angry at who or what? It shows the incongruence of the atheist mindset. To me, is a fascinating fact. But that's the way Satan works. Right. It's an eye for eye objection without any fact.
Enough to say, yeah, you want to step outside? Or, I'm done talking. You got me in a corner. I don't like it. I'm out of here. And I'm not saying they're all like that, but these are highly charged discussions sometimes. And two typical comebacks are you'll never meet the evidence, and any naturalistic theory is preferable to yours, because any natural event is more likely than a supernatural event. Okay, now, here's what I want to pose for the rest of this lecture. Why is that so? What is going on in the skeptical mindset if the person honestly, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, let's say they honestly believe, A, you'll never reach levels of evidence that I require, and B, I don't have to give you a naturalistic theory because any theory is okay. Now, I encourage my students, if you're going to do dialogue on the resurrection, make them choose a naturalistic theory. Because once they do, you do tighten if you're good with the naturalistic theories, you tighten the noose pretty quickly. There's a trend today in debates not to tell anybody where you're coming from, and just to say, they're all more likely than resurrection. Okay, now here's the question for you. What do we need to do to change this, what I think is an imbalance? Where do we need to go? And I want to pursue this for the next, actually, 2 lectures after this one. But where can we go to change the skeptical mindset to cause them to realize either that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but let's say something that levels a playing field, so I just need some evidence or decent evidence, but not unattainable evidence. That's one. Or here's another one. How do we level the playing field so they don't think that any naturalistic theory is better than what's going on here? Now, I try to think about this lecture, I try to think about this from the skeptical viewpoint. I really do. And I think some of this comes from being the dominant species in the Western world. If you are a professor at a Western university, Northern Europe, North America, Australia, and I don't know, maybe parts of South Africa, I mean, a few Western type universities, naturalism is boss on those campuses. By far, the vast majority of professors are naturalists, and a lot of the Christian professors don't talk. Until Alvin Plantinga, just 3 decades ago, who told Christians to come out of the woodwork at the state universities, let people know you're Christian and make critics respond to you, instead of being such a good philosopher that they have to respond to you, instead of naturalism being the predominant worldview. Until that happened, I think a lot of times Christians were kind of beat down in the closet, didn't come out, didn't declare, and so on. And so a person like this can be forgiven under the guise of the skeptical mindset, our title for this lecture. I think they could be forgiven for thinking naturalism is true, because everybody they hear speak on the campus, everyone they have lunch with, everyone they hear walking up and down the hall and mumbling, they're all, well, I mean, this is pejorative, but from their viewpoint, every thinking person is an unbeliever, naturalist, whatever. And if you're something different, just shut up and go mumble in your own office, but don't say it out in the hallway where anybody can hear it, because you don't want to be fired or something. At least you get tenure. So they can maybe be forgiven to think that the whole world's on their side, and they don't have to formulate their arguments quite so carefully because everyone's going to agree with them. Now, because of Alvin Plantinga, probably more than anybody else, a very prominent philosopher who taught until he just retired at Notre Dame, until just recently, because of Alvin Plantinga and a few other trends, Christians are starting to be outspoken and starting to challenge these folks. But I want to know, what has to happen for them to be more open to our worldview? And my response, my angle on this is going to be, we need to present worldview type perspectives that cause them to look at the possibilities differently. If they think naturalism is all there is, it's going to make it really hard for us to change the perspective by just coming at them with evidences. Because they may not know how to respond to what you're saying, but they know you're wrong. Why? Because they teach at University XYZ, and their buddy teaches at University ZYX, and the other one teaches at University ABC, and nobody ever questions these things because you're just silly. Are you like the flat earthers, by the way? I just thought I'd ask that question in passing. That's how they see us. And so I'd like to make some suggestions starting the next lecture, and I think it's going to take a couple for me to unpack this. But I'd like to make some suggestions that some exciting things are going on in the world today, and there's a number of evidences. I have encouraged Christians to think about where apologetics has changed in the last 30 years, to see that we've developed about 10 new arguments. Now, the arguments may be old, but the evidence for them is new. And in the last 25 to 30 years, we've come up with data in 9 or 10 different areas that hopefully will eventually topple naturalism, will cause the naturalists to think. And along the way, you have books like Thomas Nagel's book that just came out. Thomas Nagel's a distinguished professor. He's basically professor at large, which there's a few people who have titles like that, but he can basically do anything he wants to at one of the most prestigious universities in this country, NYU. And he's a professor, I think, of philosophy, and he's also professor of law. And maybe he's got a JD, PhD, I don't know. But he just came out with his latest book. He's an atheist. He's an atheist. But his latest book argues, the subtitle is How Naturalism, or certain kinds of naturalism, are almost assuredly wrong. You know what some people told me? His friends are really ticked at him for giving believers that kind of ammunition, because he's an atheist. Secondly, some people have voted it the most hated book of last year. The most hated book. But here's an insider, a naturalist, who says, hey, we better do something, we're losing ground. And you got the Alvin Planigas of the world. And when the new atheists come out, Dawkins, and of course Hitchens has passed away now, Harris, and Vic Stenger, who I just dialogued with myself about a year and a half ago, a physicist. But these are the new atheists. And you've got the old atheists, like, so there's a few loose cannons out there, like Thomas Nagel, who says materialistic philosophy is almost assuredly wrong. Or you got Michael Ruse, a philosopher of science at Florida State University, who, when Dawkins comes out and defends his atheism, Ruse says, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that this is atheism. And in one of his responses to the new atheism, specifically to Dawkins, when Alistair McGrath writes a response to Dawkins, Michael Ruse, the variously called agnostic or atheist philosopher of science, Florida State, has a quote on the front of Alistair McGrath's book, and here's what it says. He says, atheists like Dawkins embarrass me, and Alistair McGrath will show you why. He says, I'm embarrassed to be an atheist when guys like Dawkins are running around saying this. So there's a few very bold philosophers like Thomas Nagel, Michael Ruse, guys who are well enough established who can say what they want. But again, I'll leave you with this question as we go on to the next lecture. What do we have to do to disestablish the skeptical mindset that allows us to level the playing field, and how do we come at this so we force them to look at the data for the resurrection? And I'm going to make several suggestions in the next 2 lectures about new developments that maybe tip this naturalistic world upside down on its head, naturalistic worldview upside down on its head, and should make people open to events like the resurrection of Jesus.
If you read much of the philosophical literature of today, from both Christian philosophers and non-Christian philosophers, just in the short time that I've been reading philosophy since I retired from the sheriff's office and have had time to read like that, I have noticed a shift. It's what Dr. Habermas was talking about. There seems to be a shift away from what has been the standard of truth in the scientific and philosophical world for probably 100 years, maybe 50 years. And that is Darwinism in the scientific world and naturalism in the philosophical world. And almost entirely, Darwinism is no longer what is understood to be correct at the upper levels of the educational system. Now, that is not filtered down to the lower levels and into high school and grade school. All the high school and grade school texts are still teaching Darwinism. it has been scientifically proven to be not accurate. But it takes a while before that gets into the colleges that teach teachers and into the textbooks. And so what's taught in grade schools and in high schools is 20, 30 years behind what the top level scientists have concluded. Now, I'm not saying evolution is not accepted anymore. Darwinian evolution is not accepted anymore. No longer do you find top scientists believing that everything that exists came out of, or every living thing that exists came out of one single cell critter billions of years ago. There are too many holes in that theory, and it's been proven or disproven too many times. But evolutionary science still holds to the adaptation, to the macro evolutionary development and cross-species development. That still is true or believed. But there is a movement away from what has been standard. What Dr. Habermas was talking about in the philosophical world, one of the favorite guys that I like to read, because I can get a lot of time out of one of his books, because I have to read it like 5 times in order to understand it. He was talking about Alvin Plantinga. He's a I have to be careful how I say this. I don't know that I would call him a born-again Christian. He is certainly a theist. I would suppose that on some level he believes in a relationship with God. He has done more for bringing supernaturalism into the believable space than just about anybody that I know. And he writes very deeply, so when you read him, you got to read him several times. I got to read him several times before I understand what he's saying. But what he's done is made it acceptable to say you're a supernaturalist. Because, as Dr. Habermas was talking about, for years on the state college campuses, you couldn't say that and still be accepted as anything credible. And so that's changing. We're beginning to see a shift in what is acceptable to say. Now, that doesn't mean that Christianity is being adopted. And it doesn't mean that Christianity isn't being rejected. But it does mean that supernaturalism, in whatever form, is a little more acceptable than it was. And that's a huge step for where the science and philosophical world is. I don't think most Christians sitting in the pews of churches today recognize how far out of the mainstream we actually are. You know, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, we were the mainstream. We've given that place up. It's sad to say, but the church has given up the right to speak on many of these subjects because we haven't trained many Christians to live and work in those environments. And so we've given up that environment, and we need to be busy about getting back into those positions. I find these conversations very important, and I recognize that it's often very, very dry and so forth, but we need to be exposed to it because we need to be prepared to talk to people about these things and recognize that they're going to come from a position that you think is illogical because you have the Holy Spirit and they don't. And so you're going to be trying to talk to them about what makes perfect sense to you and can't make sense to them. And it makes it more difficult because the church has given up authority in these areas. I camp on the authority of the Word of God all the time because we can't give that up anymore. We have to maintain that God's Word is true no matter what, and everything else has to fit into that. And if you approach these philosophical and scientific positions with that mindset that God's Word is true, everything else has to fit into that, you can take the same data that the world is looking at and see how it fits together. And that's what Dr. Habermas is trying to establish, what he's trying to show. And the next couple of lectures, as he talks about the mind of the skeptic, the person that doesn't have the Holy Spirit, they don't believe these things because they can't, and because they're foolishness to them. And we have to show them how God's Word is accurate. And so I appreciate the way that men like Dr. Habermas, and even though I don't agree with Dr. William Lane Craig on a lot of areas, he's a theistic evolutionist and so forth. I don't agree on a lot of those things. He's done fundamental work in bringing scientific Christians to the forefront and giving Christianity an opportunity to be debated. I appreciate what Dr. Habermas just said about Richard Dawkins. If you've ever watched Richard Dawkins, he's belligerent against Christianity. He's belligerent against Christians. And so when people like Michael Ruse say he's embarrassed by him, well, yeah, he's embarrassed by him. One of my favorite guys is now dead. I was getting the C and the D backwards, and it didn't fit. Christopher Hitchens. He was an avowed atheist, but he was never belligerent about it, and he could have a conversation with you and have a discussion. His brother is a conservative Christian, and to hear those two talk with each other was fantastic. Just when you have nothing to do sometime, go on YouTube and just pull up Christopher Hitchens. Do a search for debates with Christopher Hitchens. And it's a pleasure to listen to him talk about stuff from his vantage point. I hate listening to Dawkins because he's so belligerent. Yeah. Could be, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. He debated William Lane Craig several times, and I think Dr. Habermas a couple of times. He was a pleasure to listen to because he didn't get in your face, and he was respectful. Dawkins is not respectful. If you said you were a Christian to Richard Dawkins, he would say you're an idiot. And he would be okay with saying that. And so I understand why other atheists are embarrassed by Dawkins. I don't like to listen to Dawkins at all. This is a world that if you're not much exposed to, I would recommend that you spend a little bit of time. Just YouTube is a wonderful thing for these kinds of things. Just listen to those debates. You will learn so much, and it will help you solidify what you believe and why you believe it. Yeah. Sam Harris is a brilliant atheist who doesn't typically get real belligerent, but he also doesn't accept much. But he's a young guy, relatively young guy, and very articulate. And he's probably between him and Dawkins are the face of American atheism. And a lot of people just blindly follow them because they have such notoriety. People will say Dawkins is right no matter what Dawkins says. And I find just about everything that he says to be wrong. So, Next week, Lord willing, we'll look at changing the skeptical mindset of the naturalist, part 1. What can be done to change the skeptical mindset? Questions, comments? Since we have cookies and goodies and coffee this morning, I'll give you a little extra time to re-up. Thank you, Father, for the work of Dr. Habermas in studying the resurrection and in building a body of work that has evidentiary value, that looks at what the unregenerate mind will accept as truth, and from that builds a case that I believe is pretty difficult to refute. Thank you for men that have spent their life dealing with those kinds of issues and present them. Give us a great time in the service to follow as we fellowship and as we worship and as we study, that we might look toward you and always be motivated to seeing you. Thank you for loving us. In Jesus' name.
Thank you for watching or listening to this teaching on demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. Please consider sending us an email at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com to let us know how this teaching may have helped you. Please also consider joining us in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church, located at 10251 Metro Parkway, Suite 116, Fort Myers, Florida, just south of the intersection of Metro and Colonial Boulevard. Sunday school begins at 9 and worship service at 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church.